Strings are a relatively inexpensive way to fine-tune the sound and the feel and the tone of your guitar. And there are lots and lots of options. In fact, a dizzying array of options. A wide variety of brands, a wide variety of tensions, and various materials that the strings are made out of. Although most strings are clear nylon, and then after that perhaps carbon strings, a little further down the line are rectified nylons. But before I give you my opinions about these strings, you really ought to subscribe to this channel. Just click the red button below. We do lots of reviews and we have lots of opinions on all things related to the classical guitar. So prior to this, I've reviewed both carbon trebles, carbon strings, as well as guitar strings with nylon trebles. The carbon strings were Augustine Paragon, the nylon strings were Labella 2001, and for all the reviews I used hard tension strings, and just to review why, I like them because they don't move around as much, they don't buzz when I play hard, and also, as I've mentioned before, I have a 640 scale guitar, which is 10 millimeters shorter than a standard guitar, so for me, hard or high tension strings are somewhere between normal or medium tension and high tension. So it's really the perfect string tension for me. So what I want to talk about today are rectified nylons. What are rectified nylons? Well, and why do they need rectifying? Well, the way nylon strings are made is they're extruded, kind of like if you used to extrude Play-Doh through various shapes to make all sorts of different things. And the problem is when they're extruded, they actually have inconsistencies. They're not perfectly round, they're not perfectly uniform in dimension. You could go and polish them up and make sure that they were completely uniform in their diameter and in their consistency all the way through. In other words, you would rectify the problem that was engendered by the extrusion of the molten nylon and the cooling process. And so some companies still do this with some of their strings today called rectified nylon strings. And these strings are considerably less common than clear nylon strings. And one could reasonably ask, well, why would you not want to have a perfectly, ground string? Why would you just put up with clear nylon if you can have rectified nylon? And I'm not sure what the answer to that is, although I can guess. What happens is when you do this rectification process, the strings end up being rougher. They're not quite as smooth and glassy, slippery, and so they actually have quite a bit of texture to them. I don't know if you'd be able to see this. I'll try and move it up here, but it may not work. You can see that rather than being clear, these are kind of a grayish white color, and that's because of the rectification process, which leaves them somewhat rougher. Now, what's the problem with strings being rougher? Well, the problem is that you can have increased string noise, the same problem that we have in the wound strings when we're shifting our position can be also encountered on rectified nylon strings. And I have to say that particularly once you play them for a couple of weeks or even a week, I don't see this as being a huge problem. Anyway, some people feel that you have increased string noise and therefore it's just really not worth the small amount you might get from it. The second thing is that the tone is warmer. Now, if you want a warmer tone, perfect way to do it. If you already feel that clear nylon is warm enough and maybe even too warm, you're thinking, well, maybe I ought to do carbon because that's a little bit more bright and a little bit more piercing. Well, then going to rectified would be one step away from what you wanted to do. What else do you get with this rectification process? Well, the other thing you get is with this, perfect tuning of the guitar string, you get a little bit of a boost in terms of your third string intonation. When we were talking before, we talked in both reviews about the quote-unquote problem of the third string, which can be twofold. One, it can sound too drastically different from the wound string, sound too tubby. And again, this is not something that rectification would really affect too much. We'll take a listen. Some people feel that there's less of a tubby sound to the rectified nylon, but that's probably in the ear of the beholder. Let's give it a shot here. So we'll go from our wound D up to our rectified G. I think it could just be the brand. This now is the Savarez brand, I should have mentioned earlier. Now, Savarez was one of the first companies to do this rectification process on nylon strings, and in fact, these days the rectified strings made by Savarez are just called traditional strings. One of the problems, one of the reasons it seems that rectified nylon strings are less common is that many companies don't mention that in the name of the string. So for instance, there are some companies that it will just be not clear that you'll be getting rectified nylon unless you read the specifications. One of those would be Savarez. So Savarez traditional nylon strings are rectified, and these are the ones that have been traditionally called by the color of the card they come on, which relates to the tension. So for instance, these being high tension are typically referred to as Savarez yellow card strings. But it's the traditional series, the 520s. Again, the French. So 520J, Jaune, I think, is the yellow, which is the high tension. And there's also normal tension and low tension as well. So what else might you get from the rectification process? Well, the point really is to maximize the consistency, precision, and accuracy of your intonation. That's the whole point in rectification. So for those of you, and I imagine there might be a lot if you try it, the G string, as we've mentioned before, being so much thicker than the other unwound strings, often leads to intonation problems higher up the neck. And one of the ways we spoke of to deal with that is to use carbon trebles, because they're much thinner. The G carbon is about the same diameter as the B nylon string. But if you didn't want to do that, if you weren't interested in going to an all carbon set, or if you didn't want to have to buy a separate carbon G string, or restrict yourselves to the very few sets that actually come with a carbon G and then nylon above that. Another possibility, especially if you had a guitar you thought was perhaps too bright already, would be to switch from a clear nylon string to a rectified nylon string. Rectification, again, improves the intonation. And so if you do that in your guitar, on the G string, and they don't match with your nylon strings, again, two options. One is to go rectified, a little warmer, and perhaps it will increase the intonation, and another is to go to carbon, which almost always improves the intonation because it's so much thinner. So quite a nice, round, warm sound. I must admit, I'm enjoying these more than I thought I would, and we'll have to see. I'll be listening back to the comparison of the Soar Opus 6 number 8 study, which I've done on both the carbon strings, the Augustine carbon strings and Labella clear nylon, as well as this, which will be coming up in just a moment. And you see the intonation is quite good. I mean, it's certainly to the limit that I can even tune a guitar. These really sound right in tune on just about every, on every fret, really. So there's my review of the Savarez traditional yellow card rectified nylon strings. I still have a few string sets that I want to try out. I'm looking forward to trying out titanium, perhaps the mix set. And so I'll be sharing those with you. And I think that in order so you don't miss that, you should subscribe to our channel right now. And in addition to that, you can head on over to nylonplucks.com/strings, and we have a 5-step guide to choosing your perfect string. So thanks for watching, and don't forget to keep watching, and we'll see you next time.